She inherited a worthless cider press on a forgotten farm. They laughed when she bid her last $250 to save it from developers. But what they didn't know was that a Brooklyn bartender was already driving 8 hours north, and he was coming to settle a debt that was nearly a century old. If this story finds you at a moment when you feel like you're at the end of something, or maybe the difficult beginning of something new, I want you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button, because this is a place for stories like that. For people like us. The bus smelled like stale coffee and damp wool. For 212 miles, I had watched the manicured suburbs of the city bleed into frayed-looking towns, then into the vast, lonely stretches of brown and gray that marked the edge of November. Every rotation of the wheels was a turn of the page, away from the only life I'd ever known. On the seat beside me was a backpack containing 2 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, and a toothbrush. In my pocket was a manila envelope, creased from the 2 days I'd spent holding it, reading the contents until the typed words blurred into meaningless shapes. Inside was a key, a deed to a property I'd never seen, and a letter from a lawyer whose name sounded like a piece of a building. Gable. 18 years. That's what it took. 18 years of moving between houses that were never homes, of sleeping in rooms that held the ghosts of other temporary children, of learning to pack light because you never knew when the call would come. My 18th birthday wasn't a celebration. It was an eviction notice. They give you a bus ticket, a final check for a few $100s that's meant to be a running start but feels more like a shove, and a list of resources you both know are already exhausted. They smile and say, "Good luck, Alara." They mean it, I think, but luck is a currency I've never had much of. The bus wheezed to a stop in front of a gas station that also served as the town's depot. Northwood. The sign was peeling, the wood underneath splintered and gray. I stepped down onto the cracked asphalt and the cold hit me instantly, a sharp, clean shock that felt different from the city's damp chill. It smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. The bus pulled away with a hydraulic sigh, leaving me alone in a silence that was so complete it felt loud. A couple of men in flannel shirts glanced at me from the gas station's convenience store, their faces impassive, their curiosity a tangible thing. I was new. I was other. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and started walking toward the address on the lawyer's letterhead, my worn boots crunching on the gravel shoulder of the road. The town wasn't much. A single main street with a post office, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a hardware store, and a handful of other brick buildings that looked like they'd been standing there since the invention of brick. Mr. Gable's office was on the second floor of one of them, above a shop that sold quilts. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step an announcement of my arrival. His door was frosted glass with his name, Silas Gable, attorney at law, painted in flaking gold letters. Silas. The same name as my grandfather. I wondered for a moment if they were related, but it was probably just a common name in a town that time forgot. The office was a single, cluttered room that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco, though there was no sign of a pipe. A man who I assumed was Mr. Gable sat behind a mountain of a desk, his head bowed over a document. He was older, with a fringe of white hair around a bald head, and a face etched with the kind of tired lines that come from listening to other people's problems for a living. He looked up when I cleared my throat, his eyes a pale, watery blue. "You must be Alara," he said. It wasn't a question. "I was expecting you. Have a seat." The chair opposite his desk was cracked leather and sank alarmingly when I sat in it. He watched me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You look like him," he said finally. "Your grandfather. Same eyes." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't seen my grandfather since I was 6 years old. My memories of him were fractured, dreamlike images of a large, calloused hand holding mine, the smell of sawdust, and a low, rumbling laugh. He was the only real family I had, and then he was gone. The system told me he'd abandoned me. For years, I believed them. Mr. Gable shuffled some papers on his desk, pulling a thin file from the chaos. "Right. Let's get to it. Your grandfather, Silas Vance, passed away 3 months ago. His will named you as his sole heir. He slid the file across the desk. This is what's left. A property about 4 miles out of town. 40 acres of land, a house, and a barn. And a significant amount of debt. He let that last word hang in the air. He owed back taxes going back nearly a decade, plus some other liens. The county has put a claim on the estate to settle the accounts. My stomach, already a tight knot of anxiety, clenched harder. I had imagined a small inheritance, a clean slate, a place to start. What he was describing was a hole, and he was handing me a shovel. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It means the property is yours, in name, but the contents are being auctioned off to pay the taxes. Whatever is made from the sale will go to the county. If it's enough to clear the debt, you keep the land and the empty buildings. If it's not, well, the county will likely seize the property itself in a few months. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning in protest. Frankly, Alara, the place isn't worth much. The house is dilapidated. The land is mostly rock and overgrown woods. The only thing of any real value is the old cider press in the barn. He saw the confusion on my face. It's an antique, a big one. From the early 1900s, some collectors are interested, and a developer who's been buying up land in the area has his eye on it. They think they can get a few thousand for it. Might be enough to cover a portion of the taxes. He paused, his gaze softening slightly. Your grandfather was a complicated man. He kept to himself these last years. Let the place go. People around here thought he was strange, a recluse. I just nodded, the word abandoned echoing in my mind. It was one thing to be told that by a social worker. It was another to have it confirmed by someone who knew him. He'd had a home this whole time, a place he could have brought me to, but he didn't. He left me in the system and let his own life crumble into debt and decay. The familiar sting of resentment pricked at my eyes. The auction is tomorrow morning, Mr. Gable continued, pulling me from my thoughts. At the property. You have the right to be there. You even have the right to bid if you have the funds. He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. He knew I didn't have any funds. The check from the state was barely enough for a week at a motel and some groceries. It certainly wasn't enough to bid on anything. Here are the keys, he said, sliding a single, rusted iron key across the desk. It was heavy, ornate. A skeleton key from another century. The address is on the deed. It's a long walk. He handed me a folded, hand-drawn map. I'm sorry to be the bearer of such bleak news, young lady. Your grandfather, he specified in his will that I wasn't to contact you until your 18th birthday. He was very clear on that point. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than professional detachment in his face. It looked like pity. I hated it. I stood up, taking the key in the map. Thank you, Mr. Gable, I said, the words feeling stiff and formal. I'll walk. He nodded slowly. One more thing, he said as I reached the door. He left a box for you. In the house. He said it was important you got it. The walk was longer than 4 miles. Or maybe it just felt that way. The road wound out of the small cluster of buildings that was Northwood and into the countryside. The sky was a vast, unforgiving sheet of gray. The trees were skeletal, their bare branches clawing at the clouds. There were no sidewalks, just a muddy track beside the asphalt. A few cars passed me, their drivers slowing down to get a better look at the girl with the backpack walking to nowhere. I could feel their eyes on me, their silent judgments. I imagined the stories they were telling themselves. Runaway, troublemaker. I was used to it. In the system, you are a file before you are a person. A collection of incidents and assessments. You learn to wear the anonymity like a shield. My grandfather's road was unpaved, marked only by a leaning wooden post with the numbers carved into it, almost invisible beneath a coat of moss. The map called it Vance Lane. It was more of a suggestion than a road, two deep ruts carved into the earth, choked with weeds and fallen leaves. The lane twisted through a dense stand of pine trees, the air growing colder, the light dimmer. The silence here was different from the silence in town. It was older, deeper. It felt like walking into a place that had been holding its breath for a very long time. And then the trees opened up and I saw it. The house was a skeleton, too. A two-story farmhouse, its white paint peeled away to reveal the weathered gray wood beneath. The porch roof sagged in the middle, held up by what looked like prayer. Windows were boarded up, others were just dark, gaping holes. Beside it stood the barn, a massive structure of dark, weathered wood, its great doors slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of profound darkness within. The land around them was a mess of tangled briars and weeds, with the gnarled, twisted shapes of old apple trees visible in the distance. A wave of despair washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. This wasn't a home. It was a ruin. It was a grave. The iron key felt cold and heavy in my hand. It took some effort, but the lock on the front door eventually turned with a loud, groaning clank. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, releasing a gust of stale, cold air that smelled of dust, mice, and something else. Something faint and sweet, like dried apples. I stepped inside, my boots echoing on the bare wooden floorboards. The inside was as neglected as the outside. Furniture was draped in white sheets, looking like a congregation of ghosts. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of gray light slanting through the dirty windows. I walked through the downstairs rooms, a living room with a stone fireplace filled with old ashes, a dining room with a long, shrouded table, and a kitchen where a thick layer of grime covered every surface. It was a place where a life had simply stopped. In the living room, on the dusty mantelpiece above the fireplace, was a single, small, framed photograph. I picked it up, wiping the glass with my sleeve. It was a picture of a young woman with my eyes, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. My mother. I had never seen a picture of her before. Standing beside her was a much younger version of my grandfather, his arm around her, a proud, happy smile on his face. He looked strong, vital. Nothing like the strange recluse Mr. Gable had described. A knot of grief and anger tightened in my chest. He had this. He had these memories. And he had me. Why would he throw it all away? Why would he leave me? I found the box Mr. Gable mentioned in the master bedroom upstairs. It was a simple wooden footlocker tucked away in the back of a closet. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, and the scent of old paper and cedar filled the air. Inside, neatly stacked and tied with twine, were bundles of letters. Dozens of them. On top was a single, sealed envelope with my name, Ilara, written on it in a shaky but elegant script. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was dated just a few months ago, shortly before he died. "My dearest Ilara," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally come home. I know you have questions. I know you must hate me. I wouldn't blame you if you did. The story they told you, the one about me abandoning you, is the story I needed them to tell. It was the only way I could keep you safe. The world is more complicated than they tell you in those homes, little bird. There are debts, and not all of them are paid with money. I made a promise a long time ago to a good man. A promise to protect something. This land, this house, this life. It was all part of that promise. It might not look like much now, I know. It looks like I let it all fall apart. But sometimes, the safest place for something precious is to make it look worthless. No one goes digging for treasure in a junkyard. My head was spinning. Safe from what? What promise? The letter was maddeningly vague, full of riddles and metaphors. There's more you need to know, and the answers are in these other letters. They tell a story, our story. Read them, understand them, and know that not a day went by that I didn't think of you, not a single day that I didn't ache with the choice I made. The auction is tomorrow. They will try to take the press. Don't let them. It's more than iron and wood. It's the heart of this place. It's the heart of the promise. Do whatever you have to do. I have left you what I can, but it is not a gift of ease. It is a gift of choice. What you do now is up to you. All my love, your grandfather, Silas. I sat there on the dusty floor, the letter shaking in my hands, and I cried. I cried for the little girl who believed she was unwanted. I cried for the old man who died alone in this decaying house, weighed down by secrets. I cried for the fact that the first words I'd had from him in 12 years were from beyond the grave. After a while, the tears stopped, replaced by a cold, hard knot of determination. I didn't understand his riddles. I didn't know what promise he was talking about. But I understood his final instruction. Don't let them take the press. I spent the rest of the day exploring the property, my grandfather's words echoing in my mind. I walked through the overgrown apple orchard, the trees ancient and gnarled like old men, their branches heavy with a few last withered apples. I walked the perimeter of the 40 acres, the land rising and falling, a stream cutting through a ravine at the far end. It was wild and beautiful in its own neglected way. Finally, I went to the barn. The huge doors creaked open, and I stepped into the cavernous space. The air was thick with the smell of hay, earth, and that faint, sweet scent of apples. Light streamed in through gaps in the wooden slats, illuminating a universe of dust. And in the center of the barn, dominating the space, was the press. It was a monster, a magnificent beast of dark cast iron and massive timbers, taller than a man. A huge screw, thick as my body, rose from the center. Wheels and gears and levers sprouted from its sides. It looked less like a piece of farm equipment and more like a strange industrial altar. It was silent, coated in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, but it radiated a sense of immense, dormant power. This was the heart of the promise. I reached out and laid a hand on the cold iron. It felt solid, real, a connection to him, an anchor in the swirling chaos of my life. That night, I didn't sleep in the house. I couldn't bring myself to disturb the ghostly, shrouded furniture. Instead, I climbed the ladder to the hayloft in the barn, burrowing into a pile of old, dry hay. It was cold, but the hay held a surprising warmth. Through a gap in the roof, I could see a sliver of the night sky, a smear of brilliant, distant stars. I opened the footlocker, and, by the weak beam of the small flashlight from my backpack, I began to read the other letters. They weren't addressed to me. They were addressed to a man named Liam O'Connell in Brooklyn, New York. They spanned decades. The early ones were from a young Silas, full of hope and plans. He wrote about buying the farm, about meeting my grandmother, about the birth of my mother. He wrote about the cider they made, the best in the county, he boasted. The apples here have a secret, he wrote. Something in the soil, in the water. It's a sharp, clean taste of the earth. As the letters progressed, the tone shifted. My grandmother got sick. The medical bills piled up. He wrote about taking on extra work, about the strain of it all. Then my mother was born, and there was joy again, but it was a joy tinged with financial anxiety. Liam, it seemed, was his best friend, his confidant. He offered to help, but my grandfather was too proud to accept. "This is my burden, Liam," he wrote, "but I thank you for the offer of a brother." The last letter in the first bundle was written 12 years ago, not long after he left me. It was short, the handwriting almost illegible. "Liam, they know. I don't know how, but they found out about the old business. They're trying to leverage it, trying to take the farm. They've made threats. I can't have Alara here. I can't put her in the middle of this. I'm putting her somewhere safe where they can't use her against me. And I'm going to make this place look so worthless, so buried in debt and ruin, that they'll lose interest and move on. It's the only way. I'm sorry. Tell your boy to remember the promise. Tell him to watch for her. When she's old enough, she'll come home. And the press will be waiting. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring. The old business? Threats? He hadn't abandoned me. He had hidden me. He had sacrificed his home, his reputation, his last years on Earth to protect me. The story the system told me was a lie. It was a shield he had built around me, brick by painful brick. The weight of his love, a love I had thought was lost, settled over me, immense and heartbreaking. I fell asleep in the hayloft, the letters clutched to my chest, my grandfather's words a lullaby of secrets. The morning of the auction was cold and bright. The sun was a pale wafer in the sky, offering light but no warmth. I woke stiff and sore, but with a strange sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do, even if I didn't know how I was going to do it. By 9 o'clock, cars and pickup trucks were rumbling down the lane, parking haphazardly in the overgrown field. A small crowd gathered near the barn, local farmers in muddy boots, curious townspeople, and a few men in clean, expensive-looking jackets who stood apart from the others. They had the predatory stillness of vultures. The developers. An auctioneer, a portly man with a booming voice and a ridiculous waxed mustache, was setting up a small podium. Mr. Gable was there too. He caught my eye and gave me a small, sympathetic nod. He thought I was here to watch my inheritance be sold off piece by piece. They started with the smaller items from the house: furniture, tools, boxes of old china. The bidding was sluggish. The locals picked up a few things for cheap, but it was clear everyone was waiting for the main event. Finally, the auctioneer gestured toward the barn. All right, folks, now for the item you've all been waiting for. One antique, turn-of-the-century rack and cloth cider press. A magnificent piece of local history. We'll start the bidding at $1,000. One of the men in the expensive jackets immediately raised his hand. $2,000, he said, his voice flat and bored. Another man from his group countered. $2,500. They were bidding against each other, driving up the price for show. My heart pounded against my ribs. The check from the state was for $300. I had spent some on the bus ticket and a few supplies. I had $257 to my name. It was an impossible, laughable amount. The bidding quickly reached $4,000. The locals were just watching now, a silent chorus of onlookers at a game they couldn't afford to play. The auctioneer was beaming. 4,000 going once, going twice. This was it. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. Do whatever you have to do. It was more than iron and wood. It was a promise. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs, and stepped forward. My voice was small, thin in the vast open air, but it cut through the silence. $250. A beat of stunned silence. Then, a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. It started as a few snorts and chuckles, then grew into open, derisive laughter. The man who had bid $4,000 turned to look at me, a smirk on his face. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn jacket and muddy boots, and shook his head in amusement. The auctioneer squinted at me, his professional smile faltering. I'm sorry, miss, did you say 250? Yes, I said, my voice stronger now. I lifted my chin, refusing to let them see the hot shame that was flooding my cheeks. That's my bid, $250. He chuckled, a condescending, patronizing sound. Honey, the bid is at 4,000. You need to add to the bid, not subtract from it. More laughter. My fists were clenched at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. I felt small, stupid, utterly humiliated. This was a mistake. I had made a fool of myself. I had failed him. Mr. Gable started to walk toward me, a look of pained apology on his face, ready to shepherd me away from the embarrassment. "Sold!" The auctioneer banged a small gavel on his podium, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sold to the little lady for the astronomical sum of $4,250. Now, let's be serious, folks. Do I have 4,100? He was trying to move on, to erase my ridiculous, pathetic gesture. But for a single fleeting moment, I had stopped them. I had stood my ground. It was a hollow victory, but it was something. I stood there, frozen, as the man from the development company raised his hand again. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the auction fading into a dull roar in my ears. I had done what he asked. I had tried, and I had lost. And that's when I heard it. The sound of a car engine, coming down the lane fast. It wasn't a truck, it was something smoother, quieter. A dark sedan, out of place in this rural setting, pulled into the field and stopped. The driver's side door opened, and a man got out. He was tall, maybe in his late 20s, with dark hair and the kind of tired, knowing eyes you see on people who work late nights. He was wearing a black peacoat over a plain gray t-shirt, city clothes. He moved with a purpose, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, the auctioneer, the developers, before finally landing on me. He walked straight toward me, ignoring the curious stares. He didn't smile, but his eyes were kind. He stopped in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth coming off him. Then he turned to face the auctioneer, who had paused, mid-spiel, to gawk at the newcomer. The man's voice was calm, but it carried an authority that cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "Her bid stands," he said, his voice clear and steady. The auctioneer stared at him, bewildered. "What's that?" "The bid is at 4,000. The man reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "No," he said, his eyes locking with the auctioneer's. "The bid is $250. She made it. I'm covering it." He opened the envelope and fanned out a stack of crisp $100 bills. "And here's 5,000 for the press. Cash. Consider the auction concluded." The silence that followed was absolute. The developers looked stunned, their smug expressions wiped clean from their faces. The locals were staring, their mouths agape. Mr. Gable looked like he'd seen a ghost. The auctioneer, for his part, just stared at the money, his greed overwhelming his confusion. The man didn't wait for an answer. He turned back to me, his expression softening. "You must be Ilara," he said. "I'm Finn. Your grandfather was a friend of my grandfather." He extended a hand. I just stared at it, unable to process what was happening. A Brooklyn bartender, a man named Finn, had just driven 8 hours to buy a cider press for $5,000 because I had bid $250. My grandfather's words from the letter, the one to Liam O'Connell, flashed in my mind. "Tell your boy to remember the promise. Tell him to watch for her." This was the boy. Liam O'Connell's grandson. He was here. He had come. After the money was counted and the stunned auctioneer and his disappointed bidders had packed up and left, the crowd of locals slowly dispersed, whispering amongst themselves, throwing curious glances our way. We were the Newtown mystery. Mr. Gable approached us, his face a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. "Finn O'Connell?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Liam's grandson? I'll be damned. Silas always said you O'Connells kept your word." Finn gave a small, weary smile. "It was the most important thing to my grandfather. A promise is a promise." He turned to me. "Are you all right?" I finally found my voice. "I don't understand," I stammered. "Why, how did you know to come?" "My grandfather received Silas's last letter," he explained. "The one he must have written right before he passed. It was simple. It just said, 'The birds are flying north. The auction is on the 15th. We've been waiting for that letter for 12 years. I checked the county records online every few weeks, watching for the auction notice. When I saw it, I started driving. We went into the house, the three of us. The dust and the silence no longer felt oppressive, they felt expectant. Finn looked around the living room, his eyes lingering on the shrouded furniture. "I haven't been here since I was a kid," he said softly. "My grandfather used to bring me up in the summers. Silas would let me help with the apples. He taught me how to work the press." He walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up the photograph of my mother and grandfather. He smiled. "He loved your mother more than anything. And he loved you. Everything he did, letting this place fall to ruin, the fake debts. It was all a performance, a long, painful con to protect you." Mr. Gable cleared his throat. Protect her from what, exactly? Silas was always vague. He just said it was old business. Finn set the photo down gently and looked at me. "The old business started during Prohibition. Our grandfathers, Silas and Liam, they were young men then, best friends. Silas had this farm, the best apples in the state. Liam had a bar in Brooklyn. They went into business together." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "This place wasn't just a cider farm, Ilara. It was the source for one of the most successful speakeasies in New York City. They made Applejack. Hard cider. The real stuff. Silas would press the cider here, barrel it, and run it down to the city in a truck with a false bottom. They were partners." He gestured around the dilapidated room. "This house, the barn, the press. It was all bought with money that wasn't exactly legal. They did well, very well, but they made enemies. A crime family that ran most of the bootlegging in their part of the city. When Prohibition ended, Silas and Liam went legitimate, but those people never forgot. They always believed our grandfathers had a fortune stashed away somewhere." A cold dread washed over me as I began to understand. "Years later," Finn continued, his voice low, "after your grandmother passed and your mother had you, things got tight for Silas. The family that our grandfathers had crossed paths with had grown into a powerful corporation. They started buying up land, expanding their empire. They came back here, sniffing around. They didn't want money anymore. They wanted this land. They made threats against your mother, and then against you. That's when Silas sent you away, and that's when he and my grandfather came up with the plan." Mr. Gable, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. "The debt," he said, his eyes wide. "The back taxes, the liens. It was all fabricated. Silas took out loans he didn't need and never paid them back. He let the tax bills pile up. It was all designed to make the property look like a worthless, debt-ridden money pit. To make it so encumbered with legal red tape that it would be more trouble than it was worth for the developers to try and seize it through force or intimidation. He was buying you time. 18 years of time." Finn nodded. "He knew that as long as the property looked valuable, you would be a target. You were his leverage. So he made it look like a liability. He became a recluse. He let the farm go to seed. He played the part of a crazy old man who'd lost everything. And it worked. They left him alone, figuring they'd just wait for him to die and pick up the pieces for pennies on the dollar at a county auction. It was too much to take in all at once. My entire life, the story I'd told myself about who I was built on a foundation of lies. But they were lies born of a fierce, desperate love. My grandfather wasn't the man who abandoned me. He was the man who had sacrificed everything for me. Finn must have seen the turmoil on my face. "He left you something else," he said. He walked over to the stone fireplace. He told my grandfather about this, just in case. He knelt down and pried at a loose stone in the hearth. With a grating sound, the stone came free, revealing a dark cavity behind it. Finn reached inside and pulled out a metal lockbox. It was heavy. He placed it on the floor between us. There was no key. "Stand back," he said. He picked up a heavy iron poker from the fireplace tools and, with a few sharp, well-aimed blows, broke the lock. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in oilcloth, were stacks of cash. Old bills, but still legal tender. And underneath the money was a thick, leather-bound ledger. Finn handed the ledger to me. I opened it. The first page was dated 1925. It was a record of their business. Gallons of cider pressed, barrels shipped, payments received. It was all there, in my grandfather's neat handwriting. But tucked into the back of the ledger was another set of documents. Water rights, geological surveys, legal opinions. That's the real treasure, Finn said, pointing to the papers. It's not about the bootlegging money, it's about this. I looked at him, confused. About 10 years ago, he explained, Silas discovered something. The stream that runs through the back of this property taps into a deep, natural aquifer. The water is incredibly pure. The geological survey shows it's a massive source. And according to the original deed from the 1800s, this property owns the sole rights to it. Not just access rights. Ownership. The developers, that corporation descended from the old mobsters, they don't care about the land for condos. They know about the water. In a world where fresh water is becoming more valuable than oil, owning this aquifer is like owning a gold mine. That's what they've been after all this time. I looked from the ledger to Finn, my mind reeling. The cider press. The apples with their secret taste. It was the water. It had always been the water. My grandfather hadn't just been protecting me from a past grievance. He had been protecting my future. An inheritance so valuable that people would threaten a child to get it. He couldn't sell the land or the rights, Finn said, because they would have just taken the money and come after you. He couldn't fight them in court because their lawyers would have buried him, and it would have put you in the spotlight. So he did the only thing he could. He made it all disappear. He hid the truth, he hid you, and he waited. We spent the rest of the day in a daze. Mr. Gable, his lawyerly composure completely gone, pored over the documents, marveling at my grandfather's foresight. This is ironclad, he kept muttering. The chain of title is perfect. He filed all the right easements and covenants to protect it before he started accumulating the debt. The man was a genius. Finn and I explored the house again, but this time it looked different. The dust and decay no longer seemed like neglect, but like a disguise. A clever camouflage that had done its job perfectly. We opened the shrouds from the furniture, revealing beautiful, handcrafted wooden pieces underneath. We opened the boarded-up windows, letting in the clean, cold air and the pale afternoon light. The house began to breathe again. That evening, Finn helped me start a fire in the fireplace. We sat on the floor in front of it, the warmth pushing back the chill of the old house. A lockbox sat between us, the money still inside. What happens now? I asked, my voice quiet. Now, we honor the promise, Finn said. The money from the box is enough to pay off the fake debts and the back taxes, with plenty left over to start fixing this place up. The water rights make you untouchable. The developers can't touch you. They lost. Silas won. He looked at me, his expression serious. This is your home now, Alara, if you want it. It's a lot to take on, I know. I thought about the group home, the sterile hallways, the temporary beds, the feeling of being a guest in someone else's life. I thought about the years of feeling adrift, untethered. Then I looked around the room, at the dancing firelight on the old wood floors, at the ghost of my grandfather's smile and the photograph on the mantel. This place wasn't a ruin. It was a foundation. I want it, I said, the words feeling more true than anything I had ever said. I'm staying. A slow smile spread across Finn's face. Good, he said, because I was hoping you'd say that. My grandfather made me promise that if you ever came back, I'd help you get the press running again. The press? I asked. But why? For old time's sake, he said, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. and because I happened to know a few dozen bars in Brooklyn that would pay a fortune for authentic, prohibition-style hard cider made from the best water in New York State. He stood up and offered me his hand, pulling me to my feet. "It's going to be a lot of work. We have to fix the roof, clear the orchard, service the press." He led me to the front door and opened it. The sun had set, and the sky was a deep, star-dusted indigo. The air was cold and sharp. It felt like the beginning of something. "But we can start tomorrow," he said. We stood there for a long time, side by side on the sagging porch, looking out at the dark, silent land that was mine. It wasn't just a property. It was a legacy, a story. It was a home, waiting to be woken up. In the weeks that followed, life transformed. Finn stayed, taking a leave of absence from his job in the city. He said he had a promise to keep, and O'Connells keep their promises. Together, we started the slow, arduous process of bringing the farm back to life. We began with the house, cleaning away the years of dust, mending what was broken, making it a place to live instead of a place to hide. Mr. Gable handled the legal side, his tired demeanor replaced with a newfound vigor. He seemed to take a personal delight in paying off the county with the bootlegger money, as he called it, and filing the paperwork that officially cleared my grandfather's name and my title to the land. The developers made one more attempt, a letter from a fancy law firm with a lowball offer to buy the property. Mr. Gable sent back a one-sentence reply, along with a copy of the geological survey of the aquifer. We never heard from them again. The biggest job was the barn and the press. It was a mechanical marvel, and with Finn's knowledge, passed down from his grandfather, we began to understand it. We cleaned every gear, oiled every joint, replaced every worn leather belt. It was hard, physical work, the kind that leaves your muscles aching and your hands raw. But every day, as we brought the magnificent machine back to life, I felt like I was also bringing a part of myself back to life. I was no longer a ward of the state, a file in a cabinet. I was the owner of Vance Orchard. I was Silas Vance's granddaughter. Word got around Northwood, as it always does in a small town. People saw the lights on at the old Vance place. They saw Finn's car. They saw us working. The story of the auction, of the mysterious city boy and the crazy $5,000 bid, had become a local legend. One day, an old farmer who lived down the road stopped by. He was one of the men who had laughed at my bid. He didn't say anything at first, just watched us work for a while. Then he cleared his throat and said, "Your grandfather was a good man. Stubborn as a mule, but a good man." We all thought he'd lost his mind. Looks like he knew exactly what he was doing. He left a basket of fresh vegetables on the porch. It was an apology, an acceptance. After that, others came by. They offered advice, tools, a helping hand. They started calling me by my name. The day we finally got the press working was a day I will never forget. We had spent a week harvesting the last of the gnarled old apples, the ones the deer hadn't gotten. We loaded the pulp onto the cloths, stacked the racks, and Finn and I put our shoulders to the great wooden handle that turned the screw. With a deep groan of ancient iron and wood, the press began to move. And then, a trickle of golden, fragrant cider flowed from the spout. We caught it in a glass and we both took a sip. It was sharp, sweet, and clean. It tasted of the earth, of history, of a promise kept. It tasted like home. My story isn't a fairy tale. The work is hard and the future is uncertain. There are still moments of doubt, moments when the ghosts of the past feel a little too close. But then I look at the press, standing proud in the center of the barn, and I remember the choice my grandfather made. He chose the harder right over the easier wrong. He chose to look like a failure in the eyes of the world in order to be a hero in secret. He taught me that inheritance isn't about what you're given in terms of money or property, but about the story you're given and the choices you make with it. He gave me a second chance and a place to belong. And that's a lesson I want to share with all of you. So many of us are handed stories about ourselves that aren't true. We're told we're not good enough, not wanted, not worthy. We're judged by our appearances, by the mistakes of our families, by circumstances beyond our control. But you have the power to find the truth. You have the power to read the letters, to find the hidden boxes, to understand the real story. And you have the power to choose your own ending. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or had to fight for your own second chance, please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I believe in the power of sharing our experiences. This community we're building here is for people who understand that the most valuable things are often the ones that look worthless to the outside world. Thank you for being a part of it. And don't forget to subscribe, because
I've been spoiled by Stardew Valley picking up loot for me. You have to use a power to suck up loot in this game. Yeah, Ellie. So luckily they have like a little, like a Kirby inhaling, like action that you can do. And you can just spin in a circle and it'll pick everything up, which is really nice. Oh, thanks for the follow, Shannon. Appreciate it. Ooh, okay, more ore over here. How am I breaking so easily? Well, great question, Jers. Sorry, I have to reread your name for a second. I made a potato hamburger steak, which is slightly more powered up than the regular one. So it just lets me like break things faster. There are better recipes, but this one's like pretty easy and chill to make. So I usually just opt for this one instead of doing anything like more complicated. You're making money moves tonight, Dino. Thanks, Hard Eyes. Also, thanks for the follow, Sam. Johns, appreciate it. Oh my god, and hi, Lucifer. It's so good to see you. Thanks for the heart me. How you been? Okay. I'm great, Lucifer. How are you? Okay. I think we just punched the ceiling for a little bit. I think that was our last food, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we can just be a little more judicious about what we break. Then we can go home with Mewtwo. Still can't believe we found him. I'm good. I'm great. Got some good news today. Oh, that's awesome, Lucifer. Hell yeah. Also, you're killing it, Ezzy. Also, Nelly, I definitely made sure to empty out our pockets before we came here for that very reason. I was like, that'd be so annoying. Okay. Preparations. I mean, having our home base now is like so nice because I've been like trying to organize the area.